Welcome. If you're lying in bed right now, eyes heavy, mind still racing, you're in the right place. Close your eyes. Picture this. Golden sands stretching into the distance. A slow burning sun sinking behind ancient pyramids. The Nile glimmering under stars that haven't changed in 5,000 years. Tonight, we're going on a different kind of journey. One that peels back the golden mask of ancient Egypt's most famous figure, the Pharaoh. You've seen the images, tall, majestic figures wearing double crowns and false beards, seated on thrones of lapis lazuli and gold, surrounded by priests, courtiers, armies, even gods. They look untouchable. Like walking gods on earth, the ultimate power, the ultimate luxury. But here's the truth nobody tells you. It sucked to be a pharaoh. Yep, that's our story tonight, because behind the gold was pressure. Behind the divine titles were sleepless nights. Behind the incense and parades was a human being who couldn't sneeze without checking if the stars were right. We're going to walk in their sandals, feel the weight of the crown, sit in the throne room, wander the palace halls where whispers could kill. It's not going to be loud or fast, just a slow, quiet walk into history. And as you drift off to sleep tonight, maybe you'll ask yourself the same question. If they were gods, why did so many pharaohs die unhappy, childless, or violently? Tonight we unravel the myth, not to ruin it, but to see the truth behind it. The very human story beneath the stone. So take a deep breath, let the sands shift beneath your feet, and let's begin.
So you're born a prince in ancient Egypt. Sounds cool, right? Gold rattles, servants bringing you honey-sweet dates, a name written in hieroglyphs before you even open your eyes. But from the moment you take your first breath, you're not just a baby. You're a symbol, a vessel, a future god in training. There's no crawling around in the mud or sneaking extra figs. You're being groomed, literally and politically, because being royal means you don't belong to yourself. You belong to Egypt. From day one, you're wrapped in linen and expectations. Nurses and tutors surround you, not to spoil you, but to shape you. Every blink is observed. Every first word is measured. And if that first word isn't Ra, someone's probably taking notes. You're taught the gods chose your family, that your bloodline is sacred, that you're not like the little kids outside the palace walls, and just like that, the golden cage closes. By age 5, you've got responsibilities, lessons in divine law, geography of the Nile, how to pose like Horus without tipping over. You don't get a bedtime story, you get a scroll about your great-great-grandfather smiting enemies with a spear. Your tutors don't laugh when you make mistakes, because mistakes aren't cute when you're destined to wear the crown. Imagine trying to play hide and seek while everyone's bowing to you. There's pressure to be strong, smart, holy, and maybe even immortal. Meanwhile, you're barely tall enough to reach the table. Your siblings? They're not really your playmates. They're your rivals. Each one just might be another heir in waiting. Even your uncles, cousins, and stepmothers could be plotting, and no one's going to explain that out loud. You just feel it, like a sandstorm coming from far off. Your mother? Maybe she loves you, but she might also be trying to make sure you're the chosen heir, not your brother. She smiles, but so do crocodiles. And then there's the divine kingship idea. They don't just tell you you'll be king. They say you're part god. Not pretend, not metaphorical, a literal walking deity. Ever try being a toddler and a god at the same time? You can't cry. Gods don't cry. You can't be afraid. Gods aren't afraid. You can't just be a kid. You're divine property now. And here's the real kicker. All this grooming, all this pressure, it's not to give you power. It's to make you useful. You are the golden gear in the machine of Egypt. You must rule, but also obey the stars. Smile at priests, memorize prayers, accept that your friends might be spies. And when you're finally old enough to understand what it all means, you realize you never had a choice. The cradle was made of gold, sure, but it was still a cage. All right, deep breath. You've made it through childhood. You've dodged palace gossip, memorized 100 prayers, and somehow managed to look holy while tripping over your ceremonial sandals. Now, it's Coronation Day. This should be your big moment, right? The crown, the cheers, the gold bling, the priests waving incense like they're trying to scare off mosquitoes. But here's the thing. This isn't the start of your freedom. It's the moment your life stops being yours. Coronation isn't a party. It's a performance. First, you've got to interpret the omens. Was the Nile high enough? Did the birds fly in the right direction? Did anyone sneeze at the wrong time? Because if anything goes off script, you're already cursed. Not even crowned yet, and someone's whispering that you've offended a god. Next, the rituals. You're anointed with sacred oils, dressed in linen, weighed down with gold. Priests chant, drums pound, everyone stares. You must walk exactly right, say the right words, bow just low enough, but not too low, because gods don't bow. And finally, the crown. Not one, but sometimes two. The white one for Upper Egypt, the red one for Lower Egypt. Worn together, it looks like a wedding cake on your head. Heavy, awkward, and 100% required. From now on, you are divine. And divinity has no off switch. You can't trip, you can't sneeze, you definitely can't have a bad day. Every move is public, every moment is ritualized. Your meals, symbolic. Your wardrobe, chosen for you. Your hobbies? What hobbies? You don't laugh too loud. You don't slouch. You don't yawn during offerings, even when the priest is reading the 18th hymn in a row. You are never alone. Servants shadow you, guards watch you, priests whisper advice, scribes write everything down. You're not a person anymore. You're an idea in gold sandals. And heaven forbid you want to just be yourself. What does that even mean? You've been molded since birth. Now you're a mask with a heartbeat. The living Horus, the chosen of Ra, no pressure. Even your private life isn't private. What you eat, who you marry, when you pray, it's all political, all symbolic, all part of the performance. Want to cry because your cat died? Better not. Gods don't cry. Want to sneak out and look at the stars? Forget it. Gods are supposed to be the stars. And just when you think you've got it under control, boom, an eclipse, a drought, a priest with a vision. Suddenly the gods are angry, and you're the reason. Because if the Pharaoh is divine, then everything bad is your fault. So yeah, you're a king, but you're also a prisoner of perfection. The throne is made of gold, but you're sitting on thorns. And the crown? It doesn't fit. You're the Pharaoh now, crowned, revered, technically divine. Sounds amazing, right? Except divinity can be pretty lonely. Being a god on Earth doesn't mean you get invited to dinner parties. It means you get worshipped, watched, and kept at a very sacred, very cold distance. Everyone bows, everyone obeys, but no one looks you in the eye. You're expected to radiate power and perfection every minute of the day, and emotions? Those are for mortals. You're not allowed to cry in public, not allowed to laugh too hard, or grieve or get annoyed when your sandals chafe. If you get sick, the priests panic. If you smile too much, it's un-Pharaoh-like. You become a statue that breathes. And because you're sacred, you're also untouchable, which means no friends, not real ones. People either fear you, serve you, or wants something from you. Every conversation is careful. Every relationship is strategic. Even your own family bows and speaks in rehearsed tones. Try telling a joke in that environment. No one laughs unless it's a good political move. Even the priests, those supposed to be your spiritual support, are watching you for weakness. Because if the Divine One slips up, it could mean chaos, or worse, a new Pharaoh. So you learn to hold it in. You smile when you're sad. You nod when you're angry. You pray when you're scared, but never where anyone can see. The rituals continue, day after day, year after year, and the truth is, sometimes you want to scream, or sleep in, or dance to flute music in your pajamas. But gods don't get days off. You sit alone in golden halls. You walk silent corridors with echoing footsteps. You eat meals surrounded by people who call you my lord, but never ask how you're doing. Because to them, you're not a person. You're a title, a living monument, and monuments don't get hugs. So yes, you have power. You have servants and songs and temples carved with your name. But you also have silence, so much silence. Even in a crowd, you are alone. Even surrounded by gold, you are hollow. And every night, as the palace quiets and the oil lamps flicker low, you wonder if anyone really knows you. Not the god, not the mask. You, the boy who used to look up at the stars and dream. You'd think that once you're crowned Pharaoh, you'd get a break, maybe kick back, sip some pomegranate juice, watch the Nile flow. Nope. Welcome to the palace, a glittering maze of drama, jealousy, and accidental poisonings. Because even though you're supposed to be divine, the people around you, very, very human. Let's start with the royal wives. Yes, plural. You don't just marry one woman, you marry many. Wives, concubines, politically convenient cousins. Maybe even your own sister because, hey, gotta keep the bloodline pure. And they don't all get along. Behind the smiling faces are power struggles. One wife wants her son to be heir. Another thinks she should be High Queen. There's gossip, flirting with generals, bribing priests. It's like ancient Egyptian reality TV, with higher stakes. Then there are your siblings. Some love you. Some tolerate you. Some are just waiting for you to trip over your sandals so they can take your place. And it's not like you can talk to anyone about it. Who do you trust? The brother who brings you gifts, or the one who suddenly became best friends with your enemies? Your children? Adorable, but also tiny time bombs. Each one is a potential heir and a potential threat, especially if their mother has plans. And don't even get started on the court officials. The vizier smiles too much. The general is just a little too popular with the army. The priest keeps bringing visions that sound suspiciously like political advice. Everyone's nice to your face, but you can feel it, the tension. Like walking barefoot over scorpions. One wrong move and it's whispers in the hallway. A servant vanishes. A guard switches sides. Sometimes someone brings you figs, and you wait to see if the taster drops dead. And yes, you have power. You can imprison anyone. You can exile them. You can accidentally send them to inspect the crocodiles. But that only works if you know who's really plotting. It's a constant chess game. And you're the king piece everyone wants to move, or remove. So you smile, nod, accept the offerings, but you sleep with one eye open. Because the palace isn't just where you live, it's where people try to outlive you. So you're the Pharaoh, divine ruler, son of the gods, master of Upper and Lower Egypt. But you still have to play nice with the priests. Because while you're the god on earth, the priesthood holds the keys to the other gods, and more importantly, their temples, land, money, and influence. Here's the catch. You might wear the crown, but the priests run the show, behind the scenes. You want the people to love you? The priests have to bless it. You want to build a new temple? Better check with the high priest of Amun. You want to be remembered as divine. The temple scribes are the ones writing the history. So, in theory, you're divine. In practice, you're constantly negotiating. The priests have their own network, their own wealth, their own hierarchy. Sometimes their temples are so powerful, they're like cities within cities. And you can't just fire a priest. They're speaking for the gods. You challenge one of them, and suddenly it's you who's accused of heresy. Let's talk about Akhenaten. He thought he could shake things up, scrap the old gods, promote a shiny new sun god, Aten, and reduce the power of the traditional priesthood. Bold move. He even moved the capital, built a whole new city just to get away from Amun's influence. But the priests bided their time. They watched, waited, and after Akhenaten died, his city was abandoned, his name scratched off monuments. The old gods came roaring back, and the priests reclaimed their throne behind the throne. Lesson learned. You don't just rule Egypt, you co-rule with the gods. And the priests are their voice. If you don't play along, the whispers start. The crops fail? Must be the pharaoh's fault. Bad dreams? The gods are angry. An eclipse? Definitely a sign. And the only way to fix it? Expensive offerings. Public ceremonies. More gold for the temples. It's like being stuck in an endless religious subscription plan. You pay, you perform. You pray they don't cancel you. So you smile during the rituals. You fund new shrines. You let the priests chant for hours while your legs fall asleep. Because the truth is, even a god king needs good PR. And in ancient Egypt, the priests were the best and most dangerous publicists you could have. Being pharaoh means never sleeping in. Seriously, the sun rises, and so do you. Because the first rays of dawn, that's your cue to start the show. And oh boy, is it a long show. Your life becomes one giant ceremony. You wake up before everyone else, not to sip lotus tea, but to perform sunrise rituals. You offer incense. You say prayers. You symbolically feed the gods their breakfast before you get your own. You are the bridge between heaven and earth, after all. Can't be late for cosmic alignment. Then it's on to more rituals. Bless the Nile. Oversee the temple purification. Recite 73 lines of the same hymn while standing perfectly still in gold sandals that pinch. You don't get weekends. You don't get holidays. Because every single day the universe needs maintenance, and you're the repairman. That thing called Ma'at? It's cosmic order, balance. The idea that everything in Egypt works because the pharaoh keeps it aligned. No pressure. If a storm hits, it's your fault. If a harvest fails, that's on you. If a hippo sneezes in the wrong direction, someone's writing a scroll about your lack of devotion. So you work, constantly. Even eating can be ceremonial. Sometimes you fast, sometimes you feast, but only after blessing 20 dishes first. And you better not spill anything. Ma'at does not like clumsy gods. There's a ceremony for births, for deaths, for planting, for cutting your hair. You must attend, lead, bless, or at least look solemn during all of them. And remember, no mistakes. Rituals have steps. Miss one and boom, bad omen. Now everyone's side-eyeing you like you broke the sky. It's exhausting. You're tired. Your priests are chanting again. You're standing in 100-degree heat wearing a 5-pound necklace and trying not to pass out. Can't someone else do this today? Nope. Delegation is not an option when your face is literally the state religion. The people believe the gods smile because you asked them to. So you show up, you wave, you chant, you nod during yet another sacrificial goat ceremony, hoping no one notices you yawned. And even when the ceremonies end for the day, there are dreams to interpret, stars to consult, scribes to please. Because every moment matters. Every action sets the tone for the kingdom. You are not just living, you are performing stability. It's a sacred job, but also a full-time, overtime, no time off ever job. The burden isn't just heavy, it never lets up. You're the guardian of Ma'at, but no one's guarding you.
What do you do when you're already king, already divine, already drowning in rituals? You build big. Because in ancient Egypt, stone wasn't just stone. It was legacy, authority, divine PR. And nothing screamed, "I'm legitimate," louder than a brand new temple, taller than your tallest priest. So you built, and kept building. You had to honor the gods, honor your ancestors, prove you were worthy, and most of all, make sure no one forgot your name. You built temples lined with gold, tombs carved into cliffs, obelisks pointing to the heavens, statues so tall they made you look taller. Even cities, entire cities. Labor, endless. Slaves, servants, farmers pulled from the fields during the off-season. Craftsmen working in dust and heat. Artists chiseling your nose just right on 10,000 walls. Materials? Limestone, granite, alabaster. Hauled for miles. Floated down the Nile. Dragged by hand and sweat and song. All of it paid from the royal treasury, which, surprise, wasn't bottomless. Want an example? Look no further than Ramses II. The guy went all in. He built so much he carved his face into half the temples in Egypt, built a new capital, covered every inch in inscriptions about how amazing he was. The temples of Abu Simbel, his. The Ramesseum, his. Massive statues, massive ego, massive price tag. By the time he was done, the kingdom was nearly broke. Future pharaohs had to scramble to keep up. Some even recycled his statues by chiseling off his name and adding their own. And here's the twist. You couldn't just build for fun. Every structure had to align with religious meanings, star charts, sacred numbers. The doors had to face the right way. The pillars had to sing when the wind hit right. It wasn't architecture, it was cosmic alignment. And if anything went wrong, bad omen. So you micromanaged, you approved every design, consulted with priests, bribed the gods with gold leaf ceilings. And while all this was happening, you were still doing daily rituals, still fighting wars, still dodging assassination attempts. Building wasn't a break from pharaoh life. It was another layer, another pressure, because the minute you stopped building, people wondered if you'd lost favor with the gods. And when you died, your tomb had to be ready. If it wasn't, bad luck. No afterlife, no second chances,
Just build a monument that lasts forever, while also running a kingdom and pretending you're not exhausted. Your legacy? Written in stone. Your labor force? Worn thin. But your face? 15 feet tall and facing the sunrise. Because even in death, the pharaoh had to rise. Being a pharaoh was already rough. But imagine all of that, plus being a woman, in a world that didn't think women should rule. Yeah. Welcome to the royal nightmare that was being a female pharaoh. Let's talk about Hatshepsut. She was smart, strategic, and probably sighed a lot. Because every time she made a decision, someone was there whispering, "But she's a woman." So what did she do? She played the game better than anyone. She wore the false beard, took on male titles, had herself depicted in statues as a man, muscles, broad shoulders, all of it, just to get people to take her seriously. Even her name on monuments was surrounded by masculine symbols, because if she didn't look like a proper pharaoh, the priests and nobles might have thrown her right off the throne. She ruled for over 20 years, built incredible temples, expanded trade, kept things stable. But after she died, they tried to erase her. Her stepson, probably a bit bitter, chiseled her name off walls, smashed her statues, rewrote history to pretend she never happened. Talk about ancient mansplaining. And then there's Cleopatra. She gets remembered as some kind of seductress, but the truth, she was brilliant, spoke 9 languages, played Roman politics like a pro. And yet, no matter how sharp she was, every move she made got twisted. Align with Julius Caesar? She must have seduced him. Negotiate with Rome? She's dangerous. Hold Egypt together during chaos? Must be witchcraft. She wasn't just fighting for her throne, she was fighting stereotypes, suspicion, and centuries of patriarchal nonsense. And let's not forget, women rulers weren't just unusual. They were seen as threats to the natural order, which meant Cleopatra and Hatshepsut had to work twice as hard, be twice as perfect. And still, the knives were always out. They couldn't show weakness, couldn't fail, couldn't even age without rumors swirling. And while male pharaohs got statues, temples, and pyramids, female pharaohs got footnotes, or worse, erased. So yeah, being pharaoh was hard, but being a woman pharaoh? It meant playing on nightmare mode, fighting tradition, expectation, and envy all at once, and doing it while wearing a crown too big, a beard too fake, and a history too quick to forget you. Pharaohs were supposed to be gods, sure, but they were also expected to be generals, commanders, defenders of Egypt, and sometimes gladiators with crowns. Because Egypt wasn't just sunshine and temple blessings. It was also surrounded by enemies who didn't care about your divine status. Let's talk about the Hittites. These guys weren't just neighbors, they were competitors. They had chariots, metal weapons, and serious attitude. And they were pushing Egypt hard in the north. The Battle of Kadesh? Yeah, that wasn't a heroic movie moment. It was chaos. Ramses II rode into it thinking he'd crush the Hittites in one big showdown. Instead, he walked straight into an ambush. His army was scattered. The enemy was everywhere. It looked like Egypt's golden boy might go down before lunch. Ramses barely escaped. He rallied what troops he could and fought his way out. And then he carved epic stories of his great victory into every wall he could find, even though it was more like a glorified draw. Spin doctors were a thing even back then, and the Hittites weren't the only problem. To the south, Nubians, skilled warriors, fiercely independent, sometimes allies, sometimes enemies, but always watching for weakness. Pharaohs had to send expeditions, military and diplomatic, to keep things in balance. Then came the Sea Peoples. Nobody even really knows where they came from, just that they arrived in waves, attacking cities, burning crops, crushing armies. They showed up during a time of famine and collapse, when Egypt was already limping. The pharaoh at the time, Ramses III, fought them off with grit, ships, and sheer willpower. But the cost? Astronomical. His treasury bled gold, his people starved, the kingdom never fully recovered. Being pharaoh meant leading battles you couldn't afford to lose. It meant riding chariots into storms of arrows. It meant sleeping in tents instead of palaces, eating dusty bread, and trusting that the gods and your soldiers would show up tomorrow. And if you lost, it wasn't just your army that died. It was your reputation, your divinity, your grip on power. Every defeat was a crack in the crown. And the threats didn't end when the swords were sheathed. Wars left scars, debt, orphans, uprisings. People wondered why their God King couldn't stop the bleeding. So you trained constantly, recruited endlessly, sacrificed to the gods like it was a second job. You put on armor instead of robes, held spears instead of scrolls, prayed that the border fortresses would hold just one more season. And even when peace came, it never lasted, because enemies were always watching, waiting, and the pharaoh could never rest.
You'd think being a living god came with some perks, like, say, control over the weather? Nope. Turns out, even if you were worshipped from sunrise to sunset, the Nile still did whatever it wanted. And when it didn't flood like it was supposed to, oh boy, trouble. Egypt lived and died by the Nile. Every year, the river was supposed to rise just right, bringing silt, nutrients, and water for crops. If it flooded too much, fields drowned. If it didn't flood enough, famine. And when famine hit, guess who got blamed? Yep, the pharaoh. You were supposed to be the keeper of Ma'at, cosmic order, balance, prosperity. And now people are eating bark stew and whispering about how maybe you aren't so divine after all. Let's talk Amenemhat III. He ruled during a time of major environmental stress. The Nile's patterns were off, crops failed, grain prices spiked, people starved. And as king, he had to look calm, powerful, in control. But inside, panic. Because once the granaries ran dry, it wasn't just hunger spreading, it was doubt. Rebellions simmered, the temples got edgy. And Amenemhat? He scrambled to build dams, dig canals, offer more sacrifices, anything to fix what nature broke. It wasn't enough. Even with all the engineering, things kept falling apart. Some scholars think this kicked off Egypt's decline into the Second Intermediate Period, a time of chaos, invasions, and pharaohs who ruled for about as long as it takes to roast a duck. And that's just droughts. Let's sprinkle in plagues. When disease hit Egypt, the panic was immediate. There were no medicine, just omens, priests, and the pharaoh's reputation on the line. People didn't understand disease as biology. They saw it as divine punishment. And if the land was being punished, that meant you, Mr. God on Earth, must have messed up. So you doubled the rituals. You ordered mass sacrifices. You had teams of priests reciting sacred texts like spiritual spam filters, hoping something would click. And let's not forget earthquakes or dust storms, nature's little reminders that nobody's really in control. Your advisors started whispering. The scribes hesitated to carve your latest divine victory on temple walls. The people prayed louder, but not always for you. Some even wondered, should a new pharaoh take over? So you smiled, you gave speeches, you ordered monuments built even in famine, just to prove everything was fine. Because if the land failed, you failed. And that, more than any enemy, army, or jealous sibling, was the scariest part of being pharaoh. You weren't just fighting people, you were fighting nature. And nature?
Didn't care about your bloodline, your crown, or how many statues you had with your arms crossed. Being Pharaoh wasn't just dangerous on the battlefield. Sometimes the real threat was waiting behind a curtain. Because while the crown looked golden, it was balanced on a blade. Pharaohs were assassinated, usurped, poisoned, backstabbed, sometimes literally. Let's talk about Ramses III. You'd think Egypt's last great warrior king would go out like a legend. Instead, he got caught up in the harem conspiracy. Sounds dramatic, right? That's because it was. One of his wives, Tai, wanted her son on the throne. Problem was, he wasn't the crown prince. So what did she do? She rallied allies, palace officials, magicians, even kitchen staff. It was like an ancient Egyptian version of a thriller. Their plan? Kill Ramses III, slip her son onto the throne, and rewrite the future. They almost succeeded. The pharaoh was killed, probably had his throat slit. But the plot unraveled just after. Dozens were put on trial, some executed, others forced to take their own lives. Even high-ranking judges were caught tampering with the process. It was messy, bloody, and it showed just how unstable the palace really was. Because behind the rituals, the gold, the divine aura, there was paranoia. You didn't know who to trust. Your wife, your son, your general, even your royal cupbearer might be slipping something extra into your evening wine. And succession? Ha! That was never smooth. When a pharaoh died, the scramble began. Brothers vied for power. Advisors chose sides. Generals raised troops. Sometimes even bodyguards took the throne. There were coups, where the only thing royal was the blood spilled. The problem was simple: too much power, not enough trust. Everyone wanted a piece of the throne, and if you hesitated, even blinked, someone was waiting to pounce. So you stayed guarded, always. You watched your food, you tested your scribes, you eyed the priest who blessed your sandals a little too slowly. Because ruling Egypt wasn't about enjoying power, it was about surviving it. And in the palace, survival was never guaranteed.
So you think family's got your back? Not in the palace. Being pharaoh didn't mean your siblings cheered you on, or your wives stayed loyal, or your kids didn't eye the throne like it was candy. Nope. Family was politics, and politics meant danger. Let's start with the basics. To keep power in the blood, pharaohs often married their sisters or daughters. Yeah, it's weird, but the idea was keep things divine, keep things tight. Except it didn't stop betrayal. Marrying your sister didn't mean she liked you. Having kids didn't mean they respected you. And your mother? She might be plotting with the priesthood. Take Tutankhamun, the boy king. After he died young and mysteriously, his wife Ankhesenamun was in a tight spot. So what did she do? She wrote to a foreign king, asked him to send one of his sons to marry her and rule Egypt. Bold move. Also, a huge red flag for the royal family. She didn't trust her own bloodline, didn't see a future with any Egyptian prince. That's how shaky things were. Then there's Ramses II. You'd think having over 100 children would guarantee a loyal heir or two, but nah. Every child was a political grenade waiting to go off. Every son wanted power. Every daughter had in-laws with opinions. The more kids you had, the more factions you created. Some allied with the army,
some with priests. Some probably sat around waiting for mysterious illnesses to take down their siblings. And wives? You might have dozens, some foreign princesses, some native elites. Each one came with her own ambitions, her own network, her own kids she wanted on the throne. It wasn't a family. It was a royal reality show. Except when things went bad, they didn't throw wine, they threw curses, and maybe a knife. You had to watch your back at dinner, at festivals, at funerals, especially funerals, because the death of one pharaoh meant the rise of another, and everyone wanted a seat at the table. There were whispers, notes passed behind fans, alliances formed in gardens, and more than a few royal accidents. You might wake up one morning and find your cousin had been declared the true heir while you were still brushing your coal. Being pharaoh didn't just mean ruling the land. It meant surviving your own blood. And sometimes it was easier to deal with the enemy outside the palace than the ones you tucked in at night. So you're a pharaoh. You've survived the court, the battles, the betrayals. You've ruled for decades, built monuments, made offerings, lived like a god. Now it's time to die. But at least you think your tomb will keep your legacy safe, right? Wrong. Because if there's one thing tomb robbers love more than gold, it's a pharaoh who thought he could rest easy. Let's be real. Those massive tombs, giant neon signs that screamed, "Buried treasure inside," even with curses carved into the walls, even with guards and hidden passages, robbers found a way, and not just centuries later. Sometimes weeks after burial. Tombs were cracked open, treasures stolen, mummies dragged out, stripped, dumped, sarcophagi smashed just to get the jewels inside. It was brutal. Even Tutankhamun, whose tomb was found mostly intact, had signs of early looting, and he was one of the lucky ones. Most pharaohs, their tombs were gutted, their names forgotten, their afterlives a big question mark. Because in ancient Egypt, to be remembered was everything. It meant immortality, and to be forgotten, that was the real death. They called it damnatio memoriae, erasure, your name chiseled off walls, your statues defaced, your story untold. And if you weren't remembered, the gods couldn't find you. Your soul wandered, lost. All that work, divine titles, huge tombs, gold masks, undone by a few greedy hands and a chisel. Imagine spending your life pretending to be a god and then ending up face down in the dust, stripped and silent. Some pharaohs tried to fight it. They built secret tombs in remote valleys, added fake passages, buried decoys, told no one the real location. It helped. Sometimes. But more often, it just delayed the inevitable. Even the priests got in on it. When the economy tanked or temples needed quick funds, they recycled royal tombs, melted down ornaments, reburied bodies in group graves to save space. The afterlife, it turns out, was on a budget. So as a pharaoh, you spent your life building your forever home, dreaming of eternal praise, and you probably ended up a footnote, or worse, an anonymous mummy missing its mask.
Every pharaoh thought they'd last forever. Their names carved in stone, their faces cast in gold, their stories passed down by priests, poets, and proud descendants. But here's the truth. Most are gone, not just physically, but forgotten, faded, lost to time, sand, and silence. We remember a few: Tutankhamun, Ramses, Cleopatra,
and even they're mostly known through rumors, curses, and Shakespeare plays. But hundreds of kings ruled Egypt, some for decades, some with entire cities built in their honor. Now, you'd be lucky to find their name on a museum placard. Their temples lie buried, their statues eroded, their gods mostly gone. They thought they could outlive death by building monuments, making laws, controlling religion. But time doesn't play favorites. The desert swallowed their glory. The Nile washed away their pride. Some were erased on purpose, victims of political revenge or jealous successors. Their names scraped off temple walls, their achievements claimed by others. Others just slipped through the cracks. No drama, just decay. Imagine being worshipped for 50 years, and then no one remembers your name. That's the bitter joke of pharaohhood. You rule like a god, die like a man, and get remembered, if you're lucky, by accident. In the end, they all wanted the same thing: legacy. But legacy is fragile. And eternity? Turns out it's shorter than we thought. So after everything, the wars, the curses, the politics, the gold, was it worth it? To be Pharaoh, to live as a god on earth, and die like any man. The crown looked glorious, but it was heavy, not just on the head, but on the soul. Pharaohs were born into expectation, into duty, into a theater where every breath was a performance, every word a ritual. They couldn't cry in public, couldn't stumble, couldn't rest. The gods expected perfection. The people expected strength. And if you slipped, even for a second, someone was waiting to take your place. You were never alone, but always lonely. You were called divine, but never allowed to be human. And in the end, most were forgotten. Their names carved out, their tombs cracked open, their faces lost to time. So maybe it wasn't the gold that cursed them, or the power, or even the gods. Maybe it was the weight of legacy. Maybe they ruled not for glory, but for fear. Fear of being erased, of being just another grain of sand in the desert. Perhaps that's the real lesson in all this, that to rule as a god is to live afraid. And maybe, just maybe, it is better to be forgotten than to have ruled as a god and died afraid.